A very strange and wonderful thing happened to me when I was a little boy. I'm a baby boomer. The childhood my generation took for granted in the 50s and 60s is what they now make nostalgic movies about. Our parents gave us a freedom that would land them in hot water today. We were just kids. We weren't consumers Nike wanted to sell shoes to. We didn't sign up for expensive summer camps to learn to play organized sports. We made our own fun, and the adults barely noticed. If we played baseball, two young captains picked teams, and second base was probably a piece of wood.
No one wanted their parents to come and watch. If they did, the other kids would really make fun of you.
You learned to try hard so you'd get chosen earlier the next time. We stayed out until dark, and moms went hoarse calling for us to come home for dinner. It wasn't magical. It was a normal 1960s childhood, because consumer culture, technology, and parental paranoia hadn't wrecked our lives. I was a country boy, living in the deep woods of the Pacific Northwest, climbing trees, building forts, and all the things people wish kids were still doing.
I was famous in the neighborhood for being able to go to Ellis Pond near my home and always coming back wet, summer or winter.
Ellis Pond today, which was once a place where kids roam free, is now a city park with pathways surrounded by million-dollar homes. Young children are expected to be accompanied by an adult. If a kid gets into trouble here now,
I bet the entire community, especially the scolding media, will blame the parents.
not the kid or simply fate. Sad, but true. The only time we ever saw an adult at Ellis Pond was one winter when it froze so hard families came to ice skate. Every other time it was just kids and frogs and a wild space. But then the weird thing happened. We moved to the city. It was a nice home in a decent Seattle neighborhood, but I went from the dense forest to the concrete jungle.
And from an all-white school to one that was more than half African-American. So my little 10-year-old head was spinning in the first weeks of 5th grade when a boy brought 2 pigeons for show and tell.
I thought they were wonderful. That boy was David Lee, and I followed him home that same day. He'd caught wild city pigeons and tamed them to stay in his little pigeon house. We became friends and partners and discovered library books that describe wartime homing pigeons and hundreds of varieties of domestic show pigeons. More than half a century later, I'm still friends with David and Whit Johnson, another of our 1960s pigeon gang. We remember vividly and laugh about the dangerous places we went to catch pigeons. Derelict houses, abandoned warehouses, under bridges. When I go back to the alleys around Pioneer Square, it's pretty fancy now. Not the home of winos and weirdos that we learned to navigate as kids.
Today our parents would go to jail for not knowing where we were.
But they were parenting perfectly for that era. Don't let anyone tell you different. And we were better for it. We went back to the old neighborhood, to David's home, which he still owns, and I brought a few pigeons. Holding these big birds like we did as kids brings back a lot of emotion. You're observing and interacting with another species. It just happens to be in your backyard. I saw this later with my own children. They could hold an egg or a baby without the parents leaving the nest. And they could take the young pigeons far from home and see them return. Then a friend sent me a wonderful book by Richard Louv titled Last Child in the Woods.
And boom, I realized my own observations were part of a deeply disturbing social trend affecting children everywhere. A condition Louv calls nature deficit disorder.
My friend underlined Louv's first sentence on page 1, that raising pigeons on a rooftop in Queens made you part of a long-ago connection with nature that kids once enjoyed. At that moment, I decided to tell this story, not about the old days, but about modern children and the power of pigeons, because I knew in my heart, maybe more than any storyteller in the world, that the connection can still be made.
Bottom line, I realized if I didn't do it, no one else would.
Here are a few of the people and places I included in the final story of Young Wings. I had evidence of the power of pigeons from a 20-part series I directed for Chinese television over a decade ago. One story featured a racing pigeon program at an alternative school in Toppenish, Washington. Not only did all the at-risk boys show dramatic behavior improvement in order to earn the right to care for the pigeons, but one young teenager revealed on camera that bonding with an injured bird from the team literally saved her life.
Whenever I was feeling depressed or sad, I would go and sit by the loft and just talk to him. I actually at one time was thinking of committing suicide. And now I think of life as a great thing and I'm cherishing it every moment.
Thanks to my elementary school in the small Montana town where I live, I started a program with a horse trailer pigeon loft on the playground. This gave me lots of time to work with kids and film them getting to know pigeons. And I went to Massachusetts, where kids can win pigeons at the county fair. Children can even borrow a little pigeon loft. The result is a pigeon club so big, the county fair board gave them their own building. Belgium is the birthplace of pigeon racing, and there I spent time with pigeon fancier and teacher Susie Scholler. To help children in her 4th grade class with emotional or developmental problems, Susie built a pigeon loft on school grounds. Parents, who were very skeptical at first, have come to praise Susie and the impact of the birds on their children. Of the many happy stories parents told, none touched me more than young Thomas, who's autistic. Before the program, he never spoke. He avoided eye contact. When I met him, he couldn't stop talking about his pigeon and how much he loved it. And look at the eye contact in this photo. The benefits of a school program aren't just emotional. In a very poor district in rural Mississippi, an innovative teacher used a racing pigeon program with his elementary class. Their math and reading scores went from last to first place in their district and won Ronnie Shoemaker Teacher of the Year. I visited a high-security youth prison in England, where a prison guard created another program. The troubled teens, many in for violent acts, showed remarkable improvement in behavior to earn permission to care for the birds. And into this hard and hopeless place, the Bird of Peace brought something vital to these young lives.
Makes you feel calm.
To calm things down and ease anxiety and ease stress and relax.
But I haven't had a fight since I've been here.
I've never had any problems down here with any of them.
The young people, you see them more calmer than what they usually are. And
it's good for the boys.
I've noticed everybody's calmed down a lot.
There's some sense of calm in their lives.
Other stories included pigeon efforts in England, Ireland, and Scotland, and a 4-H program near my native Seattle. But my favorite story was about a family. In 2012, I made a documentary about a national race honoring Queen Elizabeth's Jubilee. Thousands of the best racing pigeons in England, including birds from the Royal Loft, competed. More important than his victory was why Ron Fulbrook returned to the sport. He did it to help his young partner, his grandson Mason, deal with the emotional turmoil of the death of his father, Ron's son. Their warm relationship epitomizes the bond I've witnessed all my life in the pigeon world. Whether it's family or childhood friendships like me and David Lee, I think of this special bond as the Featherhood. 50 years later, Whittier and David and I can vividly remember our birds and our bond as pigeon boys. Something about capturing and caring for this smart and gentle creature made us better people. And I can end with no stronger proof than present-day kids living in an urban world much more challenging than what David and I shared a half-century ago. This is South Central, LA, our last stop on this quick world tour of young people and pigeons. Here, pigeons bring nature to an unnatural place. Of the many varieties of pigeons, this one is unique. This is a roller, and it's part of an ancient sport where a team of 20 birds perform above the keeper's loft, and a visiting judge scores how many pigeons simultaneously do somersaults in the air, kind of like synchronized swimmers with feathers. Rollers are becoming very popular globally, but in particular with Hispanic and Black youth. I visited twice down here, and both times I was one of very few white faces in a sea of young men bidding on birds in an auction or watching a flock performing overhead. And just like that long ago day in 1960, my color was no barrier to forming a friendship because at heart we were all pigeon people.
This is the single most difficult thing for me to have anyone believe.
That weird yet wonderful thing that happened to me a half century ago still happens today. Something about how we learn to care for this little bird, whether it's a showbird, a roller, or a racing homer, something about this descendant of the rock dove changes who we are. In this tough neighborhood, these young pigeon people are able to set aside the deadly gang affiliations, the crips and blood rivalries, and get along as friends. How much more powerful can a hobby be? Can pet keeping be? Not generations ago, but today. What is it worth to modern society if simply keeping a few cooing birds in your backyard in an inexpensive assembly of tiny houses makes you get along with your fellow man?
I asked all my new friends in the hood, the feather hood, to prove that point. The main point of this movie is once you become a pigeon person, if you're lucky, you got all the friends you'd ever want for the rest of your life. Isn't that right, guys? Yeah!